Many low voltage contractors shy away from AV work. So today's episode, we're going to discuss what is AV and why you should do it, and maybe even answer some AV questions with an AV expert.
Don't hang up that phone. We've found what you're looking for. Welcome to the Let's Talk Cabling podcast with Chuck Bowser, RCDD. What exactly does RCDD stand for? Registered Communications Distribution Designer. Just the expert you need to ensure your cable plant performs exactly as designed. Now, send the new guy to the truck for a bucket of dial tone and the cable stretchers, while you listen to an informative program on telecommunications.
Welcome to the show where we tackle the tough questions submitted by installers, project managers, estimators, customers, everybody in the ICT industry. We're connecting at the human level so that we can connect the world. Thursday nights, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, After Hours Live, where you can ask your favorite RCDD questions, and that would be me. Submit your questions early for early consideration. Send them to questions@letstalkcabling.com. If you're watching this show on YouTube, would you mind hitting the subscribe button and the bell button to be notified when new content is coming out? If you're listening to us on podcasts, on Apple or Google or one of the podcast platforms, would you please give us a 5-star rating? And if we don't earn a 5-star rating, let me know what I can do to make it a 5-star rating. These couple little tips helps us break that algorithm that they have and get out to more people so we can educate, encourage, and enrich the lives of more people in this industry. And by the way, share this with somebody. Let's spread the words. So as I mentioned, many low voltage contractors shy away from doing AV work. And I'll admit, I was one of them. And because it seemed so complicated. So I brought on a guest today, and this guest is not only an expert in AV, which we'll establish that here in a minute, but he's also a very close friend. If I have AV questions, this is my subject matter expert that I go to. Kevin, welcome to the show. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing very well. Thanks, Chuck. Good to be here with you.
It's always good. And just to be fully transparent, this is the second time that we recorded this show because the first time there was an audio issue, so I'm re-recording this. So this is the second go-around, so I know it's going to be better on the second go-around. I know it is. So a question for you. Give us the 30-second elevator pitch about Kevin and why people who want to do AV should listen to you.
Well, I don't know if I'll prove that in 30 seconds, but yes, my name is Kevin. I work at Leviton currently. I'm an instructor there doing the networking and fiber instructions. Before that, I did get, I guess a long time ago, I did start doing AV. This was back in 2002, I guess, that I started doing AV. And I really just kind of fell in love with it. I thought I wanted to be a computer guy and do programming, and got hired on with an automation company and fell in love with the idea and the cabling and making just amazing things happen with audio and video. And worked with other manufacturers, other installation companies, and really got a good background. I did complete my CEDIA certification path. CEDIA that's the residential industry certification platform and stuff. But so my level 1 installer, my EST 1 and 2 certifications as well. And so that's a little bit about me and kind of where I've come from. And I've had a lot of fun to work on a lot of cool projects.
So for those who may not know, and tell me if I'm correct here, CEDIA, the certification you have through CEDIA, it was kind of like a Bixby certification for cabling, but specifically for AV.
That's exactly right.
Cool.
Exactly.
So first question, what exactly is AV?
Well, AV, it stands for audiovisual. So of course it includes audio portions and video portions of a presentation. But what I didn't realize when I got into the industry is that AV encompasses the entire experience. So when we're talking AV, you think of a classroom, for example. It's not just the microphone, the amplifier, the speakers, the projector and the screen, but it's even the podium that you stand at. It's the lighting, it's the seating, and everything that makes up of that presentation.
So it's what provides you with the experience. It makes your experience better. So
Yes.
look at that. I nailed that one down, didn't I? So you probably heard the introduction where I said most low voltage installers or companies shy away from AV work. Why do you think they do that? And what would you tell a company that is shying away from AV work?
Well, I think that people shy away from really anything they don't understand really well. If they don't have experience in something and things like that, it makes it more difficult to try it out, especially for a customer when you've got higher stakes and things like that. So I think that's why people shy away from it.
Why? So if somebody wanted to get into the AV work, who's a low voltage contractor now doing voice and data stuff, what would you recommend would be the first step for them to do to start doing AV work?
Well, one thing that I hear from you actually is that knowledge is power, right? And so you start out with learning a little bit about what the technology is and what HDMI is and what that means, and some of the basic terms. But boy, it really isn't as hard as it may seem. My recommendation with starting AV would be to start with something simple like HDMI. So HDMI is a cable. It runs digital audio and video all over the one cable. But you can run and install that pretty easily. It's a little thicker cable. It's pre-terminated, but you can install that without too much trouble. Now, the cool thing is HDMI maxes out at 50 feet for a certified cable, but you can use extenders where all you do is pull category cable, build a permanent link, and you just plug and play in the transmitter and receiver, and you're up and going. And boy, is that an easy way to start for our network installers that know the cable really well, because all you're doing is building what you know, and then just plugging in the AV portion on both sides of it.
Yeah, I've got some HDMI signal extension questions for you at the end of the show. So the shoemaker has the best shoes. The auto mechanic has the best running cars. The cable guy has the best cable system in his house. Well, you're the best AV guy. What kind of AV setup do you have in your house? That you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing. I don't know if I agree with that necessarily for me. So I'm on the conservative side, but what I do have, I do have a distributed audio system. That means I've got speakers in many of the rooms in our house, a big multi-zone amplifier down in a rack as well. And what that really means is it's an amplifier with a matrix switch, so I can have multiple audio inputs, but any room can play any one of those audio sources. So it can switch and have music play anywhere, or even the same song play throughout the house. I do a little bit of video distribution as well with an HDMI matrix switch. But I have some Cat 6 that I've kind of fished through as well to upgrade my cabling, and I've got some cameras around the perimeter of the house. I can see and keep that kind of more secure as well. And a little bit of other automation, smart thermostats. I've got Control 4 for our platform that kind of runs everything as well. So those are a few of the things that I have going on around here.
So you said Control 4 or Control Force?
Control 4, the number 4.
Gotcha. So because when you were talking earlier about getting into AV, you said getting into the like the HDMI stuff. And I was thinking as you were talking, that's my ADHD brain going. I was thinking, it's a progression, right? So you start off with HDMI, then you get into the other systems that require programming. Nobody ever jumps in doing the heavy stuff right out of the gate, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: what is the biggest AV project that you've ever been on as an installer or designer or whatever?
Yeah, I've had some really, really fun opportunities to work on some pretty cool projects. One project that was really fun is that I got to go on a yacht, which if we don't have ocean in Utah, which is where I'm at, but I got flown out to Germany to work on this yacht. And boy, at the time, it was the largest privately held yacht in the world. And just a fantastic opportunity to go there, help do some of the automation. I worked a lot on the lighting system as well as a little bit in the theater. And I got to run ship trials and make sure things worked with all the ship equipment working and kind of measure interference and things like that. It was really, really fun.
That sounds like it was a cool project. Let me ask you this. What was different about doing it on a ship than, say, in a building? I mean, were there any additional considerations you had to do because it's on a ship?
It was noise. Well, there were a few things. Number one was space. There's no room anywhere. So every bench or compartment or anything is stuffed with equipment underneath and around. And boy, just every square inch of space is being utilized for some kind of storage or pathways and things like that. So noise was our biggest concern in space, which included keeping things cool as well. But boy, it was really hard to get proper separation between high voltage and low voltage. And then there's a lot of avionics and stuff as well that makes some noise that isn't typical in a building. So we just, like I said, we had to do ship trials, get everything up and running, and then run the theater room, the audio system, and run everything to ensure that it functioned properly under a full load.
Do you remember how big the yacht was?
I don't. I probably should look it up. I don't know if I'm allowed to say which yacht it was.
But, I didn't ask that. I just asked, do you remember how big it was? Because I figured if it was the largest privately held yacht, I'm pretty sure the person who had you put that in was probably want to keep their privacy, quiet, right?
Yeah. I don't remember the length of that. I probably should know that, but I don't remember the length of it.
It's no big deal. So here we go. I'm going to run you through a scenario. Let's say I'm the customer, and I say, hey, Kevin, I have a conference room. I need you to put up an AV system. Walk us through the steps that you would go through to do the design.
Well, one of the first things I do is I get measurements on the room, either in person or have them send them to me. But it's helpful to get what I call a lay of the land, where we know how big the room is, what shape it is, where people are going to sit, where the person's going to present. Do they want to present right dead center in the class? Or are they off to the corner? But I like to start with the end in mind. How do we want that project to end? What's the experience going to be? What are they presenting? Is it videos? Is it slideshows? And things like that. So I always start with that, just basic dimensions and functionality and what they want that to function like in the end. But once we have a good idea, at that point we can really calculate what the best screen size is going to be. And then once we know the screen size, then we can decide if we're going to use a TV or a projection screen. Because boy, those TVs get really, really expensive once you get over about 75 or 85 inches. And it becomes way more cost effective to move to a projector screen. And also, once we know the size, speakers also have a calculated coverage area. And so we can take the square footage and we can divide that to see how many speakers we need to properly cover the audio in the space. Once we kind of get the equipment figured out, then we look at the cabling, and then we determine how many cables we need to run from which location to the equipment area. And so we really work backwards. Once we get the end goal figured out, we kind of work backwards from there until we're getting down to the cabling and pathways at the end.
Very cool. So one of the questions I get asked quite often, or I see a lot, is people telling, say, TikTok videos or whatever, just to talk about putting cable in their house for their AV systems. And I know you're an instructor, so I know you know what Cat 5e is. I know you know what Cat 6 is and Cat 6a, and you can explain it very well. And I know that the TDMM recommends two different classifications. I'll put them up on the screen right here. I don't have them with me right in front of me. And then the standard recommends something. But if you were to be putting new cable in a new house, let's say you're moving, and you're going to be putting in some cable in, what cable would you select for an AV system, knowing that's going to encompass maybe that and also smart building stuff? Which category rated cable would you select?
If we're talking residential, I would probably stay with category 6. So category 6 is really the recommended anyway for your normal networking cable. But I think that would be what I would probably recommend for residential usage. It's a little different when you go to commercial because you have higher bundles, like larger quantities of cables, larger sources of noise and interference that you're working with. And so when you get to commercial, I really like to get the category 6A. And I especially like the new intermittent shielded cables like an XTP or SST cable. But those are just bulletproof and can reject noise of all different kinds, and it just works so well. But for residential, category 6, for commercial, category 6A, XTP is where I would start and then come down as the budget required.
For those who may not know, what he was talking about, the intermittent cable is, it has a shield and it has a full shield inside of it, but the full shield doesn't go all the way through the cable. It goes 3, 4, 5 feet, then there's a small break, and then there's another piece, and it just does that over and over again, which actually kind of leads me perfect to my next question, because if you didn't have the availability of the foil wrap or the intermittent wrap, would you choose unshielded or shielded?
It depends. Shielded really is a good cable and works well if it's installed properly. So if, for example, if you're in a some type of a conference room or something like that, where you're running cable from an input port up to the projector, in that application, I would definitely use just a UTP cable because there's not a proper location for bonding and grounding. So if you can't bond and ground the shielded cable, it's not going to work like it's supposed to. And in fact, it can attract more noise and actually cause more problems than a UTP cable. So if I can bond it properly, I'll do the shielded, but if not, or if there's budget concerns, I'll just use the UTP.
And that's one of the things, because I talk to a lot of commercial installers and a lot of residential installers. The commercial installers are familiar with the intermittent shielded cabling. The residential installers aren't. So if you do a lot of residential installation, you want to look at that. You might even hear called discontinuous wrap, discontinuous isolation wrap, discontinuous shield. You get almost the exact same benefits of a shielded cable, but without the added burden of having to bond both sides of the ground, as Kevin was just kind of explaining. So you get kind of the best of both worlds. Another term that we hear quite often is smart homes, right? What is a smart home, and what kind of components would you think you would find in a smart home?
When we talk about smart homes, we're really talking about homes that have smart components in them. So take a light switch, for example. If you think about a standard dumb light switch, right? Those are the toggle switches that you've got to walk to the wall and you've got to flip it up or flip it down, or it's got to manually be open and close that relay. So that's a dummy light switch in that case. A smart light switch actually has mechanics in there, right? It has actuators and things, so it can actually electronically turn on and off that light by opening and closing the relay. And so it's a smart light switch. So you can go over and turn it on and off to turn the light, turn the light on or off. Or you can go to an app and you can talk to it over an app and have it work. You can put it on timers and have it turn on and off at certain times a day, like your outside front porch or something like that you want on every night at sunset and turning off at midnight. So it's really devices that can talk and be talked to, that have the ability to communicate. And what's great is with these smart switches nowadays, smart light switches, once you turn it on your app, you can see the status. You can see which lights are on and which ones are off and things like that. But from a light switch, it kind of goes to many other devices as well. Your thermostats now can be smart, where again, you can control those from your app and get feedback and status on those. My garage doors are smart here. So they were dummy garage doors initially, but I added in some Control 4 relays and sensors. So now when I go to bed, I've got an LED that turns red if my garage door is open. So when I walk in my room, if I see that red light, I know a door's open, so I can either push the button or physically go out and check on it if I need to. But it's just devices that communicate is a simple way that I could say it.
That's pretty smart about the garage door. I have to do that with my doors. I don't have a garage, but there's more than once where, my wife and I, we kind of go to bed at different times because I'm kind of a night owl and she likes to get up early. And there's been one once she's like, "Did you lock the doors?" If we had a little LED light that we just go ding, that'd make our life so much easier and probably avoid a lot of arguments. Just saying. So here's another question for you, right? So I know because you're an RCDD and oh, by the way, you work for Leviton, and Leviton has a really good app for smart homes and stuff for those who didn't know that. So you have a unique view on this industry than somebody like I could provide, because my experience is I'm a low voltage guy. That's all I've ever done. You've done both AV and low voltage, so that makes you even more knowledgeable than me. So if a young company is going to come to you and say, "Kevin, we want to start doing cabling for smart homes," where would you recommend they begin, or how would you recommend they get into that kind of work?
I think the industry classes are a great place to start. So I mentioned CEDIA already for residential, but they've got classes you can take. They've got certification programs as well. Avixa is the other one. That's for the commercial AV. So that's AVIXA, Avixa. But they are the commercial AV group that you would go to. Same thing. They've got a certification program. They've got classes. They've got trade shows, things like that. But that's a fantastic place to start. I also like manufacturer websites. There are lots of manufacturers that sell AV equipment, and they have their own videos, sometimes some of their own classes and modules that you can start with. But I would start with a little bit of education. There's a lot of bad habits out in the industry. And so you don't just want to watch the basic YouTube videos with do-it-yourselfers out there. Start with the manufacturer trainings and learn how to do it the right way from the beginning.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because YouTube can be a great source of information. But whenever you're doing any kind of research, always evaluate where that information is coming from. So I like that you point out manufacturers. So if I'm looking in, how to put in an HDMI extender, and I see that, I know Leviton makes a couple different kinds. So let's say I find a Leviton video on how to do HDMI extenders, and then I find another one that was done by Billy Bob Joe and a Biscayne station wagon YouTube channel. I'm going to give more credit to Leviton because they're a manufacturer. They've got engineers, and it's probably going to be more accurate video. I like how you point that out. So HDMI extenders, you mentioned them earlier, right? Can you explain how does it take that HDMI signal and put it over category ready cable?
Well, it's a great question. So HDMI, of course, when you think of the sources of HDMI, like a Blu-ray player or an Apple TV or Roku or something like that, right? It has an HDMI output port. And normally you plug in your HDMI cable into the back of that Apple TV box and plug the other into the TV, right? And it just transmits that raw HDMI signal through to the TV. When you use an extender, instead of going directly to the TV, you go into the transmitter on the extender, and the extender is like a little computer. It actually takes that raw HDMI signal and it does packet those up and sends it over your network cable. And it's almost exactly like our network packets that we use. It even has the CRC code that it packets on there, which is kind of a content list. Sends it across on the other end. It reviews the contents, makes sure it's all intact, and replies back that it's coming through properly. And then on that receiver side, it then breaks apart the packages, puts it back into raw HDMI, and then HDMI cable to the display, and it's all set and ready to go. Now that's how it works with HD-based T. So HD-Base-T is an industry standard owned by the IEEE, which is a certified solution for transmitting HDMI over category cable. In contrast, there are other, we don't call them extenders, we call them balins that allow you to transmit HDMI over category, but it doesn't do packets. In that case, it keeps the raw HDMI signal, essentially just kind of readjusts and shoves the raw signal over a different cable type. And then it just hopes that it makes it through. There's no verification, there's no feedback. Sometimes there's a dial where you can adjust the frequencies, and they kind of calibrate it as it goes through if the picture doesn't look good. So those are not certified. They can work, but they're not recommended anymore. The HD-Base-T certified solutions are much, much, much better.
Very cool. I didn't know that about the balun ones. I just thought they did the same thing. And so you said that they're similar to a network packet. So they're not exactly the same, but they're close to being?
They're a little different. Yeah, they're not exactly the same, but the same concept. They packet it up. It's different number of bits and little different packet sizes, but very similar.
Again, you have AV experience. You're an RCDD. You have cabling experience. How similar is running a cable project to running an AV project?
I think it's very similar in my opinion. So when you're running the cable, you're really following the exact same rules. You're creating the same types of pathways. You want to keep away from noise. Generally, we always recommend that you group similar types of cables together. So if I'm running some speaker cable, usually I'll package the speaker cables together and bundle those as I'm running those through the pathways. You know, if I've got some fiber, I'll put fiber in a different bundle and stuff. So I usually still separate out the cables like that into their appropriate types of cables and frequencies that we're sending, or signals that we're sending. But very similar, same pole force, minimum bend radius, all that kind of stuff still applies throughout.
All the more reason somebody who's currently installing low voltage cabling should think about doing AV work, because it's very similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Yep.
So here are some questions from TikTok. Let me flip over. And again, like I mentioned earlier, this was originally aired. I was doing a live stream on TikTok, but I couldn't use the video because it was messed up. So these are the questions. I captured them. And here's the first one, Mr. Kevin. This is from Mighty Mac, and he says, I have a satellite box outputting HDMI to my house. How can I output that to several TVs?
Well, if you have one source that you want to split to multiple displays, there is a product that does that. It's just called an HDMI splitter. And you can get a 1x4 splitter, a 1x8, a 1x16. There are different size splitters you can get. But that's really all you need is a splitter for that one input to however many outputs that you need. And there's a couple things that the splitters do. The splitters actually, well, a good splitter is compliant. It's HDCP compliant, which helps the proprietary signals to see that that's an authorized splitter that's not going to allow you to rob or copy or steal the information and resell it for profit or something like that. But it's approved. It shows that you're splitting into authorized displays and keeping the content safe like it's supposed to be.
Okay, here's a follow-up question from him. He said, you also mentioned earlier a video matrix. What's the difference between that and the balun, and which one do you recommend? Which video matrix would you recommend?
So that's a great question. I did mention video matrix a little bit. I have one in my house, but remember, a matrix switch, whether it's an audio or video, means that you can have multiple inputs and then multiple outputs. And then the matrix switch can choose which input goes to which output and split those around. But yeah, for HDMI, there are a few really good ones out there. One that I like is Binary is one brand. And another one is, I'm probably going to forget it already. I forgot it already.
Well, if
But
you happen to think of it, yeah, if you happen to think of it, let me know because this doesn't post until tomorrow night. So if you happen to think of it, just text me or let me know, and I'll just pop a thing up right here, ping, and it'll say that I have the
bing.
name up. That's the beautiful thing about recording and editing these things later, right? It gives you those kinds of options. So this question is
Yeah.
from George, and he says, I normally use 14.2 for my speakers. Can I substitute that with category rated cabling?
No, that's not a good idea. The answer is you could make it work, but what you'll find is that pushing that audio, that amplified signal through category cable is going to be so much resistance and the power isn't there to overcome it that the audio is going to be so quiet coming out the other end. And so you can make it work, but it really isn't very efficient. You're going to have a lot of loss and the amplifier will be driven so much hotter trying to get audio to get through there at the volume that you want. So much better to stay with your 14.2 or even a 16. Even 18.2 isn't too bad. You can get audio with 18.2. When you get down to a 22 and 24 gauge, it's just too small. Even if you double it up, it still doesn't give you the throughput that you need.
So you'd mentioned those the HDMI extenders over category rated cable. Is there a wireless HDMI extender, and how does that compare to the wired ones?
There are wired ones out there, but I don't like them very much personally. When they
The
first
wired
started
ones or the
coming out,
wireless? Wired or wireless?
the wireless.
Okay.
Sorry, the wireless ones. Yeah, when the wireless first started coming out, I think a lot of us tried it and thought it would be a great idea and a great tool in our pocket to make that work. But they don't work very well. They're not very reliable. And you've got to think of it this way. See, when we think of wireless, we think, wow, man, we have Wi-Fi all over the place. We can get internet and it's really cool. And I can roam around my office with internet. It's not the same with HDMI. When you're doing Wi-Fi, you can have some packet loss and some mistakes. And most times you don't see it or feel it, right? It's a little slow here and there and things still load up and stuff. But boy, when you have a packet loss with digital video, that picture goes off and it's noticeable because it's all real time. There's not a lot of buffering. You get little glitches or someone turns on a microwave oven and blasts all kinds of noise. Boy, that picture goes out and you see that. And so where it may be a solution that may be acceptable in certain applications, we see that commercial doesn't tolerate those failures and most residential don't even tolerate that. They don't want that. So cable is always your better bet.
Gotcha. Yeah, see, I know Kevin well enough, and we've had this conversation off camera before, and I know him well enough because when he said wired, I was like, no, he didn't mean wired. He meant wireless.
Yes, wired is much better.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So this question is from Andy, and Andy says, I have a camera that I want to put at the end of my driveway. It's 600 feet long. But in 2002, I put in a telephone cable, an outside plant telephone cable to the driveway in anticipation for something else. Can't remember what it was. And will that work with a camera?
So he has category cable.
He just said outside plant telephone. So and because of the date range, I'm assuming it's probably POTS cabling.
Yeah, with cameras, cameras can really only run over the RG59 like a coax cable, or you can modulate that over category cable. And of course, now they have IP cameras. So either category or coax are really the two good ways to run cameras. So category 3 wouldn't have the bandwidth to do that and definitely not the distance to get very far with it. So I would say no to the question that it really wouldn't work very well.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned bandwidth because this question is from Chuck. And Chuck says, I'm putting a camera down in my bachelor pad to monitor the baby goats. Obviously, I'm the Chuck who's asking this question, right? How much bandwidth does a camera need?
Not a lot, not as much as you would think. So as we're talking bandwidth, of course, you have different types of cameras. whether it's a 1 megapixel or a 2 or a 4 or an 8. There's a wide range of cameras you can have there, but generally they're probably for the mid-range cameras. You're probably pulling maybe 20 or 30 megabits or something. It's not a lot, so you don't need a lot of bandwidth there, but you do want it to be a reliable bandwidth that you have access to.
Would your answer be affected if I told you that I'm going to have to run power over Ethernet down there to it as well?
It doesn't too much. You still have kind of the same thing. You have the same distance ratings and things like that. So if you're running cable, whether it's 5E or 6, they'd be able to run power down there as well. So as long as you're within standards, when you try to push over, 300 and 400 and 500 feet, then that attenuation really eats up that power quickly.
Well, the good news is my barn is not more than 300 feet away from the house. it's I don't know, I have to measure it one day. And yeah, by the way, check out the other YouTube channel, because we got baby goat videos on there now, because we have baby goats now. So Kevin, I appreciate you taking time out of your weekend to come and hang out with us and talk to us about AV. And you're a great friend, and I appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here with you again. So good luck, everyone.
Thank you. Remember, everybody, knowledge is power.
That's it for this episode of today's podcast. We hope you were able to learn something. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Also, leave a rating so we can help even more people learn about telecommunications. Until next time, be safe.